So my topic today is called the Uber Workplace in DC, and this was compiled by Georgetown University. And my little intro before we start goes like this. And so the story begins. My friends, this is honestly a masterpiece, and it's going to be a long video, and you don't have to stick it out with me throughout the whole video. You can literally just go to the link if you wish and read this yourself, or allow me to read it to you. So, compiled by Georgetown University, the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor, right? And very well laid out. Table of contents, my friends. I'm going to read this to you before we get into the thick of things. Acknowledgements on page 1, executive summary. Page 2, introduction. Page 3, background and legislative history. Page 3, existing research, all based on great research. On page 5, and by the way, my father, Professor Dr. Kunert, he was a professor at this university, Georgetown, so, you know, you've got to honor him by reading an article by other specialists, by other great professors at this university. And it's also my city, my town of birth, Georgetown. I was born in Georgetown Hospital, 1968. So here we go, folks. The methodology, page 6, the case study, page 7, conclusion and recommendations on page 18. I'm excited to read that. Then there's an Appendix A, the participant summary, who took part. Appendix B, participant demographics and basic work patterns. And I appreciate my friend Tony Slaughter for sharing this with me. It's a great piece. I've read it. I'm going to read it again. So the acknowledgements, we got to read those. This report is based on an ongoing collaborative research effort of Dr. Katie J. Wells of the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor at Georgetown University, Dr. Kafui Atto of the School for Labor and Urban Studies at the City University of New York, and Dr. Declan Cullen of the Department of Geography at Georgetown, Washington University. The data collection process was reviewed and approved by the City University of New York's Institutional Review Board, file number 2016-0014. Interesting. The research team would like to thank the Urban Studies Foundation of the University of Glasgow and the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation of Kansas City, Missouri for their financial support of various stages of the project. The research team would also like to thank Alex Taliadoros, Dr. Patrick Dixon, and Dr. Joe McCartan for their guidance, John LaRue for his publication design, and Christopher Murphy, Heidi Tsiu, Karen Salmeron, and Matt Hill for organizational and communication support. Special thanks are extended to the 40 Uber drivers who shared their time, experience, and expertise. So here we go. Expert summary. The on-demand ride-hailing industry presents challenges for its new workforce. These include drivers not knowing how much they earn, increased financial risk and debt, and dangers to health and safety. In keeping with the mission of the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor to advance public policy that improves workers' lives, this report about a 2-year investigation of the working conditions of 40 Uber drivers in the Washington, D.C. area reveals that, number one, Uber drivers do not know how much they earn or lose, 100% of drivers experience difficulties with or barriers to calculating the actual compensation. Very interesting. Number 2, data about the Uber workplace is limited. Regulators and researchers do not have access to basic information about labor conditions. Number 3, Uber drivers are encouraged to take on financial risk and debt. 33% of drivers took on debt as a result of their work on the ride-hailing platform. Number 4, Uber drivers report challenges to their health and safety. 30% of drivers reported physical assaults or safety concerns. 5, despite their challenges, the Uber workplace remained attractive. 50% of drivers would recommend the job to a friend. I would also, for many reasons, but I'm not part of this. I really got to give you their research. 45% of drivers plan to keep working the job for at least 6 more months. Very interesting. And here we go. So in the introduction, municipal officials and civil leaders in cities across the United States are grappling with the unexpected arrival and rapid growth of new chauffeur services that use smartphone technologies to dispatch drivers on demand. These new services, the most visible of which is Uber, have drawn no shortage of media attention, but the labor challenges that this new industry presents have gone relatively unnoticed, especially in Washington, D.C. What are the impacts of these new chauffeur services on their drivers? To answer this question, we spent 2 years examining data about 40 individual drivers who entered and, in some cases, left the Uber workplace in the Washington, D.C. area. Through analysis of transcribed interviews and detailed surveys, this qualitative data set suggests several challenges that the Uber workplace presents for its drivers. From this investigation, we make recommendations to community organizations, residents, and city officials so they can address the identified challenges and consider interventions to improve labor conditions in the on-demand ride-hailing industry. So the background and legislative history, ladies and gentlemen, Uber first appeared in Washington, D.C. in 2011 as a modified black car service. Licensed livery drivers provided on-demand trips in luxury sedans. These drivers, who underwent regular screenings and paid registration fees, were considered independent contractors or, in company speak, partners who used the Uber app to connect with potential riders. This arrangement was similar to existing patterns in the black car industry, except that Uber allowed customers to book trips using an app on their smartphone and to pay for the service through the same app. This new option meant that customers and drivers never exchanged cash. While traditional livery services in the city were required to set rates based on elapsed time alone, Uber's car service set fares based on hours and distance and instituted dynamic pricing, a pricing model that allowed Uber to increase fares during particular times of the day. In addition, Uber allowed customers to track the location of their requested vehicles. In 2013, Uber expanded on its operation in DC with the rollout of UberX, whereas Uber Black Car Service worked with drivers already licensed. UberX opened the door to any individual with a private automobile and a regular driver license. As a low-cost alternative to local taxis, UberX enjoyed almost immediate popularity and turned the city into one of the company's top 5 markets in the country. Opposition to UberX came largely from 2 sources: the taxi lobby and the disability rights community. The primary issue objection of the taxi lobby was that UberX created unfair competition unlike taxi drivers, UberX drivers were not required to undergo regular screenings and pay registration fees, giving them an unfair advantage. For DC-based disability activists, the objection was one of accessibility. UberX drivers were not required and generally did not comply with the Americans with Disability Act, ADA, by providing comparable service to disabled clients. In 2014, the DC Council adopted regulations to govern transportation, network companies, TNCs, a new category used by the council to describe Uber, Lyft, and the now defunct sidecar. The Vehicle for Hire Innovation Amendment Act of 2014, the VHIAA, required background checks, set general vehicle standards, mandated insurance coverage, and arranged for the collection of 1% of gross receipts for all UberX rides provided in the city. Under the VHIAA, regulatory authority over TNCs was delegated to the Department of Hire Vehicles, a new entity that replaced the DC Taxi Commission and one whose powers were limited. The department is prohibited from requiring companies to submit a list of inventory of vehicles or operators. Reports on safety and consumer protection are prohibited from public release. Finally, journalists, researchers, and policymakers may not use the Federal Freedom of Information Act to access basic information about the operation of TNCs in its jurisdiction. In subsequent years, Uber released a series of related services: Uber Pool, Uber XL, Uber SUV, and Uber Family. In each of the iterations, drivers are paid a portion of the customer's fare. The portion varies based on Uber's commission, incentive programs, and applicable fees. In 2018, the DC Council approved a 6% tax on TNC services to support Metro and passed a data sharing requirement for ride-hailing services. The Private Vehicles for Hire Data Sharing Amendment Act of 2018 requires quarterly transmissions of data on numbers of drivers, trip location pickups and drop-offs, dates and times of ride requests, pickups, drop-offs, total miles driven by drivers en route to pick up and during a ride, but not while waiting for a ride request, and average fares and distances driven. These pending data sets remain exempted from FOIA. In addition, the legislation notes that data may be requested only in relation to transportation planning and public safety, not, for instance, in relation to labor standards or disabled rider access. The existing research. This report builds upon previous studies about how, if at all, digital technologies affect working conditions and adhere to current labor standards. Scholars have begun to examine whether and where digitally mediated labor platforms create more instability and precarity for workers than traditional service jobs. In a study of workers on the TaskRabbit platform for on-demand errands, sociologists, wow, that's a difficult word, Juliet Shaw and William Atwood Charles of Boston College found that traditional labor protections were eroded. Legal scholar Valerino De Stefano of the University of Leuven concluded that stable incomes are a mirage for most platform workers. Tax policy experts at American University found that half of on-demand workers surveyed did not understand their tax filing obligations or available deduction credits and liabilities. Studies about the emotional labor and unpaid aspects of on-demand work, social isolation, disciplining mechanisms, and gamification have expanded this literature. Very interesting. About the costs and benefits of platform work. In a foundational study about the ride-hailing industry, University of California, Hastings law professor Veena Dubal documents how the burdens that San Francisco ride-hailing drivers bear are greater than those of taxi drivers in terms of the costs of wear and tear on vehicles, gas, and insurances. On the particularities of Uber, researcher Alex Rosenblatt meticulously mapped the company's opaque, algorithmic, and semi-automated management system and traced many of the ways in which Uber collects enormous amounts of data from its drivers, even during the dead mile period when drivers are not being paid. Uber's app, for instance, uses acceleration sensors to track speeding and braking. More importantly, Rosenblatt's work shows the full control that Uber has to change the pay rates of drivers through the ever-changing price algorithms. Fascinating. This emerging set of research suggests that digitally medicated labor platforms, the most visible of which is Uber, are part of a long-term erosion of worker rights and an ongoing shift of risk from employees to low-wage workers. Labor platforms have been found to bolster the immunity of labor intermediaries, expand managerial control over workers, and orchestrate a sense of fungibility and superfluity with the platform workforce, rather than a disruptor, to use the classic market language of innovation platform. Applications may actually reinforce and exacerbate the existing inequalities in the labor market. The methodology used in 2016, the research team conducted and transcribed 40 interviews with self-identified Uber drivers in the DC area. Since all Uber drivers are rated after each trip, and since drivers can be kicked off the platform if their rating falls below 4.5 out of 5 stars, the possibilities for coercion are numerous and factored extensively into research design. The researchers did not conduct interviews or surveys while riding as passengers in an Uber ride, so as not to shape a participant's answers by promise of a good rating. Very interesting. The research team enlisted drivers through Uber People, an online forum for DC-based Uber drivers. The 40 interviews were conducted almost entirely in person, 38 at public libraries or coffee shops in the Washington, D.C. region, and were roughly an hour in length. Questions for drivers who received a small financial reward for their participation ranged from the broad to the specific. In addition to exploring drivers' motivations, work histories, and feelings about Uber as a company, the questions explored the more quotidian elements of the job, from daily routines and strategies for making money to the basic nature of the labor process itself. Demographic, education, household financial information from 34 of these 40 drivers was collected through a short online survey. These demographics largely mirrored estimates found in Uber-sponsored studies of the ride-hailing industry. 48% of the drivers self-identified as people of color. The ages of drivers ranged from 23 to 60, with an average of 39. 3/4 of the drivers were born in the United States. The remainder immigrated from Ethiopia, Nigeria, Cameroon, the United Kingdom, Peru, and South Korea. The drivers in this study were 80% male and generally well educated. Only 5 drivers had not attended any college, while 14 drivers had attended or completed graduate school. The drivers that participated in this study are not representative of all drivers everywhere or even those in the DC area, but the data collected and reviewed here is evidence of the structures of work that Uber drivers navigate and the kinds of worker challenges that many face in one of the most visible platform workplaces. To contextualize these findings, this report draws on analysis of policy documents and media reports and field observations around the region, including airport TNC lots and Uber Green Light Hub. Case study debt. Aman, an Ethiopian immigrant living in Washington, D.C., took out a $35,000 loan to purchase a Lincoln Town Car in 2012 after he had been approved to drive for Uber Black, the brand new private car service. At the time, he drove a taxi, which meant he already had the chauffeur license that was then required to drive for Uber Black. In 5 or 6 hours of driving for Uber Black, he earned what would have taken him 8 hours in a taxi. But not long after he took out the loan for the Lincoln Town Car, Uber changed a policy about how old cars could be. The Lincoln Town Car no longer qualified for Uber Black. He and his peers in the Ethiopian community who were facing similar situations unsuccessfully contested the law policy. The thing is, we don't have union and nobody's going to listen to us. And we just accepted whatever they Uber say. So we don't have any choice to fight with these people. They're millionaires, they have the money, so they can do what they want. And there's no competition. And nobody is going to listen to us. So we don't have anybody. So what can you do? Nothing. Aman tried driving instead for UberX, the new low-cost option for which his car did qualify, but even after a 16-hour workday, he did not earn enough to make his car payments and the $40 weekly fee to Uber for a phone. The following year, Aman moved several times and ultimately filed for bankruptcy. In all, 33% of the Uber drivers we interviewed experienced this debt trap, whereby they took significant financial risks and incurred debt to get the chance to earn a wage. Drivers invested upfront nearly all of the costs of running a car, service, the vehicle itself, maintenance, gas, insurance, and taxes. On top of that, they incur tolls, parking tickets, dead miles, the distance driven while going to pick up a passenger, safety devices, dash cameras, and mace, and rider extras, waters, and mints for drivers who had full-time salaries. The financial risks felt negligible. For the majority in this study, however, the financial risks required to work as an Uber driver were palpable and a topic of concern in interviews. Half of the drivers in the study reported monthly household incomes of $2,000 or less, which is below the federal poverty line. A driver named Diana, who had an annual income of less than $30,000, said she did not know how she would afford the $1,200 needed to fix her steering wheel that had been damaged during an Uber ride. She worried about the car's safety but kept driving for Uber in hopes of earning enough to get it fixed. The one 48-year-old driver, Joan, got caught up in Uber's debt trap after she hit a pothole and damaged her car's suspension system. She spent nearly all the money she had to get the car fixed. Then, when efforts to repair the vehicle failed, she spent more. When efforts to repair the vehicle failed, she spent more to lease a car from Uber. While the Uber Exchange program offered lower credit barriers than traditional lenders, the payments which Uber automatically deducted from drivers' paychecks were high. It resembled a company town. Joan paid $138, more than the national lease average of $100 per week. Before she worked for Uber, Joan would collect giveaway items from Craigslist and resell them on eBay or at flea markets. Her regular income of roughly $35,000 as a school bus driver covered her mortgage, but not groceries for herself and her son. Wow. Joan started driving for Uber a couple nights after work, making for 16-hour days, but within a year, Joan quit Uber and returned the car. Even after driving 6 to 7 days per week, she found herself behind on bills. 3 other drivers in this study participated in Uber Exchange's leasing program. For one of these women, Beatrice, the debt she took on to drive for Uber did not seem so different from that to which she was accustomed. She had worked for the past 7 years as a contractor without benefits in the asbestos removal industry. Before that, she had jobs in daycares, at restaurants, and as cross-country truck driver. In the week before we met, Beatrice drove for Uber for 14 hours. After Uber took out its 25% commission and booking fees, those were the good days, she earned about $300. Then she took out her weekly expenses of $170 for the lease and $63 for the vehicle insurance. What these expenses meant was Beatrice had netted less than $5 per hour. Moreover, these rates meant that if Beatrice continued to drive for Uber, she would have $12,040 worth of annual expenses in addition to the costs of gas and vehicle maintenance, which could be significant as she put 3,000 miles on her car in the last month alone. The costs of Joan and Beatrice's subprime leases were exorbitant. According to the Federal Trade Commission's, Uber regularly deceived drivers about these costs. A Massachusetts attorney general found that Uber's former lender charged higher than allowed interest rates to drivers in low-income communities. The leasing program looked similar to subprime mortgages which preyed on people of color. That Joan and Beatrice happened to be black women makes the parallel even starker. At the end of 2017, Uber phased out its in-house leasing program, but the company still advertises third-party leases at similar rates to drivers. It's really hard to talk about the pay because it changes every time they change the rules, says Susanna. Now, the slippery wage. The Uber workplace involves a complex and difficult to track set of earnings and expenses, which we call a slippery wage. When we asked a 53-year-old Uber driver named Susanna about a weekly pay, she said, "It's really hard to talk about that because it changes every time they change the rules." Like the rest of the drivers we interviewed, Susanna didn't know how much she earned or lost. The fluctuating algorithms on which pay is based and the numerous expenses drivers must deduct made it difficult for all 40 drivers in our study to make sense of their overall compensation. Sang Ho, 45-year-old South Korean immigrant who worked as a freelance blogger, described how the novelty of being able to drive his car wore off when he tried to figure out his expenses. Hey, it's a great feeling. It's a great at first, but ultimately, when you weigh in the cost of the gas, the maintenance, to be profitable on Uber, you've got to be driving a beat-up car or a used Prius or something like that, where you don't have as much fuel expenses. You can't offer mince waters, none of that stuff. Very good point made by him there. I can say that. Now, Harry Campbell, we know him, a top blogger of the ride-hailing industry, estimates that drivers need 20 pieces of information to calculate their earnings. But the rules and details of work for Uber change, sometimes hourly. Since it has been operating in Washington, D.C., Uber has reduced its base rate for drivers several times, added a rider safety fee, and then increased it, calling it a booking fee, and raised the commission it takes from new drivers. These changes, which are built into the heart of the Uber platform, seem to have a point: to keep drivers on the road and in the dark. As one driver put it, the Uber workplace is a system of smoke and mirrors. Of the 40 drivers in this study, 83% knew what percentage of their fares Uber took out, but 38 did not know how Uber determined the amount drivers took home on a single fare, whether, for instance, the booking fee is removed before or after Uber takes its commission, whether they were required to buy commercial insurance, or how tax filing worked at the end of the year. This varying degree of knowledge about compensation details could have been expected if the majority of drivers in our study were new to the Uber platform, but they were not. 70% of the drivers in the study had worked on the Uber platform for at least 7 months. Susanna, discussed above, put it this way: you'd be better off working at McDonald's. She had worked for most of her life as a writer. When she was laid off from her last job as an editor for a financial news service during the Great Recession, she was shocked that she could not get another one. She spent the next few years taking care of her sick father and helping her mother run and then close a baby furniture store. Her deceased husband had worked for the federal government, so she and her son, who has special needs, did not have to worry about how unemployment affected their access to health insurance. Being a widow sucks, but if you're going to be a widow, be the widow of a federal employee. Similarly, 53% of the drivers in this study had access through other jobs to benefits, including healthcare, paid vacation, or sick days. At the time that we spoke with Susanna, she had been driving for Uber for about a year. On Friday and Saturday nights, she generally drove from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. until 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., but these long hours did not mean that she would actually get a steady stream of passengers, earn a profit, or stay out of the kind of significant debt that beset Aman and Joan. Susanna explained, even if you do everything right, you can have a night where you make almost nothing. It's very much luck of the draw, she said. She would be terrified if Uber were her only source of income. On weekdays, she was a contract inspector for potential housing foreclosures, another unpredictable, low-wage job. Platform retention. Given the various constraints and risks outlined in this report, the Uber workplace remained attractive to half of the drivers in the study, who thought that they would recommend the job to a friend. A similar number of participants, 45%, said they planned to work on the platform for at least another 6 months from the time of their participation in the study. 56% of drivers said they were attracted to the platform because of its flexible work hours. For 90% of the drivers, their goal when they started on the platform was to add to existing income. Below are some of the explanations that point to the flexibility of the platform and its strength, and the desires on the part of drivers to supplement their incomes. AJ, it's flexible. I have 2 boys. I'm divorced, and it gives me a chance to kind of be there for them, like during the summers, for example, and work around the schedule. Zaki, the extra money from Uber is money I wouldn't have otherwise. I can get a job as a bartender, but then I would have to set a schedule. I'd have to work certain evenings, and I wouldn't like that. I like my weekend nights. If I had a regular job, I would say I don't have as much flexibility, which is one reason I would say Uber is awesome. You do create your own schedule. It's very flexible. You do whatever you want to do with your time. That's the one positive thing I'll say about it. Dwayne, if I wanted to work at Starbucks, I would have to have a schedule. If I wanted to work anywhere else, so really that's the only big benefit that I have. I work when I want, and I want to take off a month or whatever, I'm fine. Samuel, I can turn it off whenever I want. So if I'm out driving one night and I have a client that calls in and needs something, I just turn it off and I go take care of what they do. And if it's not too late for me or whatever, then I just turn it back on to go some more rides. I think the flexibility is a huge bonus for that. These responses complicate the picture of the Uber workplace, but they do not negate the concerns expressed earlier. For many drivers, the possibility of employment that is both flexible and stable is enticing and worth pursuing. The question before civic leaders and municipal officials is how to balance the flexibility that attracts Uber drivers while also addressing the workplace concerns of many of those same drivers. These concerns, which this report outlines, are often addressed in other workplaces by legislators who evaluate and regulate labor standards. The game of work, just like the Game of Thrones. So the game of work. The Uber drivers interviewed and surveyed in the study had no guarantees about how much they would earn, when they would be surge pricing, or whether they would come down with an illness and be made unable to work. As became evident in our conversations and surveys with drivers, the conditions in the Uber workplace did not best resemble those of low-wage jobs in the retail and restaurant industries, temporary staffing agencies, or even digital workplaces for crowd work. Instead of the debt trap and slippery wage mean that the Uber workplace resembles a casino where drivers must pay to play the game of work. The Uber workplace is the thick with elements of gamification, a behavior management strategy that uses gaming elements to encourage workers to be productive, but it moves beyond a mere game. At this point, I'm just going to add my personal 25 cents here. These elements of gamification, don't we see these right now with Uber Pro, where they are conducting this gold medal, platinum level, diamond level? It's become a game, right? I just had to add that in there. And we continue. Financial investments and debt are on the line. When drivers got into their cars, they routinely wondered whether they were going to make money. Half of the drivers in the study discussed their work on the Uber platform as a game to be won. Sometimes the competition was against Uber. Susanna, who we quote above, demonstrated this attitude. In order to make any money, you have to figure out how to exploit the system that Uber's set up. It's how do I even explain this in words? The mentality is not I'm going into business for myself. It's I'm buying into the system and I'm going to do my best to trick that system. That's what this is about. Very interesting. Our exchange with Bert, a 60-year-old construction worker who had been laid off, echoed this perspective. Bert, I found the way to defeat it. I will accept Uber pool trips now, but I never get a second request. Interviewer, how do you do that? Bert, turn off, I'll tell you. Later in the conversation, after Bert had disclosed his secret, he spoke more about navigating Uber's conditions of work. When the Pope was visiting, they, Uber, were like, it's going to be super busy. Let us know if you're going to drive. We want you out. It's going to be super busy. They completely underestimated the business. There was absolutely no demand at all, but they had hundreds of drivers who signed up to drive who made nothing. So there's this trend that says, if Uber says it's going to be busy, do the complete opposite. A driver named Joe described a similar strategy of seeing the job as a game to be won. It's the driver trying to outsmart Uber, and Uber's trying to outsmart the driver. Very interesting. Many drivers in this study also approached their job on the Uber platform as a competition against peers. One unexpected finding in this study was an articulation among drivers that they were smarter than their peers. 45% of the drivers we interviewed talked specifically about how intelligent they were. Intelligent enough, each said, to defeat Uber's complex and ever-changing maze of rules. These drivers talked at length about how Uber stacked a mix of worry and empathy that many of their peers were unable to win at the rigged game of work. A 27-year-old named Rick demonstrated this perspective. I don't want an hourly wage because I think I can do better than the average driver, because I consider myself smarter and more efficient with my time. I don't want somebody to say, all right, we're going to pay for your gas and give you $20 an hour base, because I'd rather take that gamble. Very interesting. Drivers acknowledged many of the risks involved in the Uber workplace, but described themselves as somehow exceptional. They believed that they had figured out how to make money while many others had not. Susanna put it this way: people that are not smart are really getting taken advantage of, and they don't think about the expensive operating costs that drivers did not know each other likely shaped this sense of superiority and the extent to which isolation is a fundamental socio-spatial relation of the Uber workplace. 45% of drivers we interviewed did not have any friends or acquaintances who worked for Uber when they began work on the platform. Another 40% knew only one friend or acquaintance who had worked for Uber. Even after working for Uber for some time, many drivers did not know any peers. There is no break room or gathering point in this workplace. The monthly meetups arranged on the uberpeople.net forum bring together fewer than 24 drivers. Indeed, 75% of the drivers in this study said they had never had a drink or meal with anyone else who had ever driven for Uber. The lack of physical space in which workers met or congregated created a material barrier to collective identities and deeply shape shapes the geography of labor and possibilities for collective bargaining in the platform workplace. Worker health and safety. Who do you call if you need help? Should I have a taser in the car? Should you have anything? What are you going to do? What are your rights to say, this is my car, get out of the car? They, Uber, don't do a lot. I mean, they got some stuff on the website about it's your right to kick people out of the car. Well, yeah, when I'm going to do that, am I going to do that with 4 guys? That sort of support would be more helpful. A panic button in the app would be nice, something like that. 2 drivers took steps to protect themselves, such as installing a dash camera or keeping a police-issued can of pepper spray within reach. But all drivers felt that Uber would not help them in the case of an emergency. A driver named Yoni refused drugs from a passenger and was subsequently assaulted. Olutun was robbed at gunpoint. He did not, however, report the infraction to Uber or the local authorities for fear of deactivation. I find that sad. I really do. Neither did a female driver named Anne, who believed she had unwillingly delivered drugs. Gary told us that he felt pressured into letting college students carry open cups of alcohol into his car multiple times. He did not want to get a bad rating by risk the passengers' ire, and he added he did not always feel safe enough to ask them to pour out their drinks. Susanna once confronted a passenger who made her feel unsafe. These 2 guys got in the car and they're talking in Spanish about setting up an illegal poker game. They did not know I understood Spanish, and they were asking me to go through red lights and stuff like that. No, I'm not going to do that. Then they started to get hostile. They started to talk trash to me. I got a bit threatened. I pulled over at McDonald's and I said, you need to get out here. Good for you, girl. Another driver named Ben, stressed out about leaving a passed out passenger in a yard at her destination. He couldn't wake her up, and there was no answer at the door. The more time he spent wondering what to do, the more potential revenue he lost. Though questions of safety are often directed at passengers in the ride-hailing industry, this study reveals that physical threats and safety questions are pressing in Uber's new workplace. A common refrain among 8 of the 40 drivers in the study was the motto to work smarter, not harder. Yet many Uber drivers ended up working very long hours. Hank, a stay-at-home father, told us how he worked all day Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 3 a.m. on Sunday. Olutun, a part-time security officer and father of 2, worked similar shifts from Friday at 3 p.m. until 7 a.m. on Saturday. Ben, a father of 5 with a full-time job in informational technology, worked even longer hours. Sometimes Friday nights I will work all through, like I'll probably come home, hang out for a bit, hit the road, and then stay out until maybe 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Sometimes I find that I'll maybe do 10 rides by 5 a.m. and then go home, take a nap for 2-3 hours, shower, hit the road again in the afternoon, and then work again damn near all night. Wow. Long shifts like these were common among the drivers we interviewed, especially on weekends. Another strategy Uber drivers used to attempt to mitigate risk and increase the likelihood of profits involved picking where to work or not to work. Some drivers avoided picking up passengers in poor neighborhoods by turning off the Uber app or refusing a ride request. A white sales representative explained, I don't pick up in Southeast DC or Prince George's County because I don't know the area. It has nothing to do with racism, demographics, or anything like that. He said he prefers Arlington, where he lives, or other neighborhoods where he feels more comfortable and safe. Other drivers explained that they concentrate in wealthier neighborhoods because Uber provides them with opportunities to earn more in those parts of the region. Uber maintains that surge pricing reflects demand, which may well be the case, but this algorithmic pricing nonetheless shapes when and where drivers seek to work. The decision of drivers to choose when and where to work also in turn shapes where ride-hailing services are available, raising questions about transportation equity. Others like Gary, a 48-year-old catering manager, said he focused less on where to work and more on when there was likely to be a surge. Surges, as he explained, occurred at distinct times and in distinct areas of the city. During a so-called surge, he might potentially double, triple, or even quadruple what he might make under normal conditions. For Gary and 34 other drivers in our study, chasing the surge was a central strategy. I would drive right now if I could make the money, but now I know they are not offering incentives. It's slow. I wouldn't make any money. But if I knew I would get pings and it would be higher, I would drive right now. I drive during the day. I drive on weekends. I drive whenever I had time. I just don't drive if it's not going to make any money. Some drivers arranged their entire schedules around the hopes of encountering incentives. Anthony, a 35-year-old high school teacher on summer break, worked a split shift of 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. While Uber certainly made it possible for Anthony to choose which hours to drive, he reported that he could only make money during the particular hours in which Uber offered incentives. He was free to choose his schedule, but this choice had serious consequences for his earnings. 48% of drivers in our study reported that they valued their free time differently after working on the Uber platform. For a driver named Mark, whatever work-life balance he had struck largely disappeared after he signed up for Uber. On a normal day, Mark explained he worked a 13-hour day, 8 hours at his research job, and then 5 additional hours as an Uber driver. After leaving the house at 6 a.m., Mark returned home at 7 p.m. This schedule was beginning to take a toll. It's adversely affected my work-life balance, and I don't do things I used to. For example, I used to study a lot more in my field. I'm not really keeping it up as much with my field. Secondly, I used to work longer hours at my current job. I used to work, say, 7:30 to 6, and now I don't. Part of that is because I don't like my current job and the people. I don't feel like they like me either. So I'm giving them everything they want, but no more than that. Before I started with Uber, I used to ride my bike once a week, all the way from McLean to Alexandria. It's a long ride, and I really loved it. Sometimes I would ride twice a week, but now, since I started Ubering, it now costs money if I ride my bike. So I found myself not riding as often. Although I'm basically healthy, knock on wood, I think I'm probably not as good aerobic shape as I was. While Uber's impact on Mark's quality of life was not wholly positive, the prospects of making money were simply too great. In 2016, Uber modified its surge pricing model by introducing a new system of boosts. Boosts were automatic surges granted to drivers who had successfully completed a predetermined number of trips during the previous week. Uber's boost system had 4 levels: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Rather than simply chasing the surge, drivers sought to chase platinum. As Ben, who we quote above, explained to us, the system of boosts reorientated his entire energy into one about the total number of trips he provided. Instead of being selective and strategic about which ride requests to accept and when or where to drive, he approached the boost game as a marathon. He explained, I had some days off from work, so I was on the road. I I just had coffee upon coffee and I'm just on the road. So I ended up doing about, I thought it was over 100, but I did 94 rides. It was 94 rides in essentially 3 days. After you do 90 rides, I think it's 90 or 95, they bump you to platinum. After you do 90 rides, yeah, they bump you to platinum, and then basically you're always chasing platinum. I'm going to stop there for a second. Can you just for 1 second see, and I've been saying this over and over again in many of the videos, especially Uber Pro level, how they are sucking you in or psychologically manipulating you to chase that platinum or diamond. Used to be platinum, now they even made it higher, diamond. All drivers began at bronze, but after completing 35 trips in a 7-day period, they are boosted to silver for the following week. For drivers who reached silver, every fare within a designated area of the city was automatically surge priced at 1.4 or 1.6 times the base fare. The surge coefficient at the gold and platinum levels was yet higher. A $10 ride with a prize 2.2 platinum boost would become a $22 fare. A driver would take home 75% of this amount after a booking fee was subtracted, which at the time was $1.55. This fee has since been raised to $2. What this calculation meant was that a driver would take home $15.34 instead of a non-platinum amount of $6.34. Platinum, however, became a phoenix for the drivers in our study. Apart from Ben's one-time encounter with it, no other driver reported a platinum bonus. 65% of drivers in the study said that the average fare was $10 or less. The stress of these games, be it chasing a surge or platinum, was a refrain in 50% of our interviews and surveys. Drivers spoke with us about falling asleep at the wheel, constant exhaustion, and the worry of finding a safe place to urinate. The work was draining, unsustainable, and for many, a challenge to their well-being. That shocks me. Dara K, executives at Uber, investors at Uber, board of directors at Uber, board of directors at Lyft, executives at Lyft. Listen to that. Just listen to what these drivers are sharing. Please don't tell me you're proud of this. So, the conclusion and recommendations, my friends. Our conclusion is straightforward. The patterns identified in this study raise questions about the extent to which working conditions in the ride-hailing industry conform to contemporary labor standards. To address these concerns, local legislators should adopt the following set of recommendations. Establish a publicly funded commission to study the impact of transportation network companies, TNCs, on platform workers, as well as on congestion, public transit usage, transportation equity, and public safety. Members of the commission should include the director of the DC Department of For Hire Vehicles or their designee, a TNC driver, 2 representatives from DC, TNC's 1 appointment by the mayor and 1 appointment by the council with expertise in workforce issues, 1 appointment by the mayor and 1 appointment by the council with expertise in transportation equity, and 1 appointment by the council with expertise in data science. The commission shall make publicly available a study within 9 months and every year afterwards that evaluates and makes recommendations regarding the impact of the effects of TNCs on the district, including the impact on the district's workforce, including economic security and labor standards, the the impact on the district's disability community, the impact on the district's public transit service, including ridership levels and racial equity, the impact on the district's transit infrastructure, including congestion and road use, the impact on the district's environment and public health, and the impact on the district's public safety, including the safety of passengers, pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. The applicability of policies regarding employee versus independent contractor status for TNC drivers, the decision in the 2018 California Supreme Court case Dynamics Operations West Incorporated versus Superior Court of Los Angeles, require TNCs to collect and submit to the department for hire vehicles and the council the following information about TNC labor conditions in a format approved by the council for the period July 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. TNC shall pay the district a monetary penalty for each violation. The total number of private vehicles for hire operators that utilize the digital dispatch services of the private vehicle for hire company in the district in each 24-hour period, including breakdowns by gender, ethnicity, and census tracts of residency, the average operator earnings per hour for all trips that begin or end in the district, including breakdowns by gender, ethnicity, and census tracts of residency, the average percentage of non-revenue hours to revenue hours for operators, including breakdowns by gender, ethnicity, and census tracts of residency, the numbers of hours that operators spend logged on into the app per 24-hour period, including the percentage and frequency of operators who spend more than 10 hours logged onto the app per period, and the total number of incidents referenced in the Metropolitan Police Department policy report pertaining to operators, including as complainants. Consider the establishment of prevailing wage for TNC drivers in DC. New York City now guarantees TNC drivers minimum gross pay of $27.86 an hour, so that drivers' pay after expenses will be at least $17.22 per hour. In 2018, Seattle, Washington established a wages and standards board for domestic workers that required set pay regardless of work status as W-2 employer or independent contractor. In London, an employment tribunal ruled in 2018 that drivers should be considered employees rather than independent contractors. This ruling grants drivers access to paid sick days, paid vacation days, and minimum wages. Los Angeles drivers are working towards a similar goal. Here we have the appendix of the participants. You can see it in the link below on page 22, all the people that participated, right? We have an Appendix B, participant demographics, basic work patterns, the driver age, the length of time of an Uber driver, the net average monthly household income, frequency of in-person interactions, a meal or a drink with peer drivers, educational level, country of origin, race and ethnicities, and you can go to this website below, lwp.georgetown.edu. We thank the people for this report. I know this is a super long video. Many may not have watched it all the way, right? But if you wish to read it, my friends, you can go to the bottom of the link and read it all yourself. Check out the graphs, read up about the participants, think about this, and hopefully conduct such a study by your university in your city and share. Amazing work, Georgetown University. Amazing work done by the people that put this 24-page document together. To me, it's an eye-opener. I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the contributions by the 40 drivers. And I truly, sincerely hope Dara K and the CEO of Lyft read it as well. I wish you a fantastic day wherever you are. Drive safe, my friends. Enjoy.